Hello, hello, happy Saturday. I am Dr. Unati. Welcome to Dr. M Health Corner Talk Show. Welcome. I see people are coming on. Thank you so much.
Thank
We have a beautiful community here on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook. Please, if you're not following us, do so because we have amazing conversations here. We talk about mental health, sexual health, women's health, men's health, issues of what's going on in the world. So I always bring all these global thought leaders to come and share their thoughts with us, and we learn and we grow and we have fun. Thank you. I see people are still coming on. Tell me where you at. You type down here. Let me know where you at. And I just want to remind our LinkedIn family, I'm unable to pull up your comments. So forgive me. I'm going to pull them up when we're done here. And again, I want to introduce our day. It's going to be fun here, guys. And we're going to go raw. I have a special guest. I'm going to introduce her shortly. Our day today is about anti-Black stereotypes and biases in clinical setting, meaning that in the healthcare system, we're going to take a deep dive on that so that we can grow. More than anything, I would like us to unlearn some of the things. And I think we're all guilty of these issues we're going to talk about here. Some of us aren't aware, some are aware. So we're gonna really grow here. Thank you so much, guys. I can see you are hearing me. Please let me know if you're not. So again, today I'm gonna introduce to you my dear sister here, Dr. Tonja Johnson. I have to read her beautiful CV, guys. I'm not gonna do justice, but just summarize it. So let me do that. So Dr. Tonja Johnson, she's basically an innovative teacher and trainer in diversity and inclusion. And of course, she is a board certified psychiatrist who is nationally recognized thought leader and a motivational speaker. Using well known research findings regarding our responses to shame and guilt, she has provided an avant garde yet practical and high yield approach to addressing conscious and unconscious bias in both the clinical setting and the private sector companies and community, sorry, and the private sector. As a consultant, Dr. Johnson's teachings have helped diversity and inclusion officers, residency programs, private sector companies, and community organizations train and motivate their staff members to embrace contemporary diversity training by helping them understand the most underlying psychological barriers inherent to diversity training. Whew, sister. She has also designed online integrated CME diversity courses that encourage engagement with the entire clinical team. She has delivered keynote addresses on how to find resilience and foster leadership during challenging times. Oh, are we not on those challenging times right now?
you.
And of course, she cutting edge breakout sessions on racism's impact on the health of entire communities and interactive GVNet based student didactics for the next generation of healthcare workers. Thank you, sister.
Thank,
Welcome to Tanya.
thank you so much. Thank you for having me. It's an
Thank you so much, sis, for
absolute pleasure
being
to
here.
be here. Absolutely, it's wonderful.
Yes. Dr. Tanya, your activism started way back in high school. Do you want to share that story? When I read about it, I was like, wow. Basically, Jim Crow laws have been existing forever from the
Yeah,
1800s until now.
yeah. I appreciate you. You had found that in the paper there
Of
online or something.
course.
Yeah, there was a funny story. I actually shared a story years ago, right after high school, with a local. I'm from Nashville, Tennessee originally,
Yes.
and so I had shared a story with a teacher, and she was just like, "I can't believe that actually happened." And she said, just recently during 2020, when we had all the social unrest, she said, "Do you remember telling me this story?" I said, "Absolutely." She said, "Could you write that up for me?" And I said, "Absolutely." And that's how it ended up in the paper. And since then, we've been telling a story. But what the story is about, honestly, is, and don't get me wrong, I had a great high school experience. Don't get me wrong, but what had happened was I had run for student body vice president, and what our principal did was they had decided that if the people who won, it was just a little too, they were all black basically, and he assigned white counterparts to each position. So there was a white there was a white co-vice president and a white president and a white, and so even the classmates who he had signed, they didn't want that, right? And they were like, listen, they won, so just kind of let them run. But this is the same principal who at the time I had this really great math teacher who had encouraged me to go into medicine. I had been kind of going back and forth between psychology and medicine, and she was like, you should go to medical school. And so within earshot, she had come from a math and science school, and she came to our school, and it's an inner city school, and she wanted to teach calculus. And he said, have you seen our students? I mean, if you can find 5 who can take calculus, I'll let you teach it. And she picked me as one of the people to take calculus, even though I need no more math, by the way. But at the time, she was like, "Yeah, no, I can pick 5 students." And it was that kind of thing that we started addressing. In the same instance, I had I was never a super great standardized test taker. Never. Right. And so I had taken the ACT, and she, my guidance counselor at the time, had said, not only am I not going to help you go to the school you want to go to, she was like, I think you need to go to school where you're better able to perform. Like, you're going to do better if you go over to school. Now, I'm from Nashville, so those who are from there know there's Fisk, historically Black colleges, everywhere represented. There's Tennessee State University, there's Fisk University, and Meharry Medical. And so she had said, no, you go to this school because that's where you're probably going to do well. I had some connections with a different school at the time, Belmont University, and I wanted to go there. And she says, I'm not gonna help you fail. You'll fail if you go to that school, and so I won't help you. Now I was number 9 in the class, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm number 9 in the class, should be able to get some help or whatever. And she was like, no. And the other thing she said was, no matter what you do, you should never major in anything science related.
Wow.
Nothing. You shouldn't do anything science related. She said, you need to avoid all science. Right. And I was like, really? She said, yeah, because you don't have it. She basically told me I don't have it. My ACT score in the science section was not great. But that was not a reflection of my ability or my potential. Yes. But in her mind, it was. And she said, no, you can't do it. So don't you even try it. And of course, I went right ahead and went to college where I wanted to go. I went to Belmont University, and I went and majored in biology and minored in chemistry. Yes. And graduated with honors, despite her prediction that it would not work. So,
you know what, Dr. Tonja?
Yeah.
How many children were told such and believed it?
Yeah,
and just quit. We're gonna talk more about that, seriously, because you are a child. You are brought to school for your teachers to be your advocates, to protect you, and you come to a place where you are told you can't.
Yeah,
and it still exists even now, right?
Yeah, absolutely, it does.
Yes.
The good thing is I did have that one math teacher who was a champion.
Yes.
And without that balance, and that's why each individual person is so important. Because if you understand that you might be the only voice of reason in this child's life, you have to speak up. The good thing is, when this article came out in the paper, I was actually able to find that math teacher who encouraged me all those years ago. And I explained to her how much of a blessing she was to me and how she impacted, my life. I was in a neighborhood, when I was a kid, I didn't know I was poor. I mean, how, I was filled with love, and I had a beautiful family, and I had no idea that I had no money. But the thing about it was she impacted me in multiple ways, by me coming from a place, because this is where our issues are. We don't pull people out of poverty enough. right? We don't reach there. Even many of our programs to target people who want to go into medicine or other clinical, we don't go into those areas. We don't go into the housing projects. We don't go into those areas, those at-risk kids. We don't go there enough and pull them in large numbers into healthcare. And it really made an impact, right? Because you are able to then, change in your life, but also the lives of people around you when you're in a position
Absolutely.
like that. Yeah.
Absolutely. You know what, Dr. Tara, I couldn't have said it any better. You know what? It's not only this community we're in front of, we need to reach there. Desmond Tutu, I'm not sure if you know about our Archbishop. Yeah, he talked about how we keep going to the valley, pulling
Yes.
all these people. We need to go up the stream and see where the issues are. You know
Yes.
what? Today, our discussion, I want us to go into the healthcare.
Yes.
Healthcare is it's one of our necessities. It's part of our socialization. It's part of life. We need it. We need healthcare workers. We need those people they will safeguard. They protect us. Supposedly they
Yeah.
protect us. But now let's talk about the experience of Black people when they enter the system. What
Yeah.
has been your observation? Or probably you can share your own story.
Yeah.
What's going on?
Well, what's going on is we have two different experiences in the same clinical setting. That's what's happening. The provider has one experience, and many times the Black patient has a completely different experience. They're not talking about it. There is no real discussion, there's no analysis, there's no feedback, and there's a disconnect. And so when we talk about one of the things that's near and dear to me is this idea of bias, right? One of the studies that I came across indicated about 52% of Black people feel that there was some type of racial discrimination or impact on their clinical encounter.
Absolutely.
But if I ask and if I look at the studies, how many clinicians, and I'm talking about everybody, not just physicians, I'm talking social workers, I'm talking counselors, I'm talking nurses, how many of them actually believe that their own bias, whether conscious or explicit, actually affects their healthcare decision? You know how many percentage believe that they are actually involved? Mostly zero. Very
no
few.
one wants to accept that.
Well, I was going to say, very few people believe that they themselves are involved. That, yes, I know it's probably happening. I get this a lot. It's happening, but it's not me. I call it the not me syndrome, right?
I'm
It
not
is
the one doing it. I'm not the perpetrator.
right. It's like, yeah, I'm sure that there's discrimination in medical, but it's not me. And so my thought is there's a huge disconnect because the doctors and the clinicians are unaware of what role they actually are playing. And that's one of the reasons why one of my online courses dives right into that aspect, that allow them to sort of look at these unconscious drivers for bias. Not just that you have bias, because we're pretty good at pointing out bias. Most studies will say that, hey, go take the AIP, the implicit association test, and you see, oh yeah, there's bias there. Oh yeah, most people. Okay, so then what do you do about it? How do you address it? What do you do? Do you even understand how it impacts you? And so what I found is that most docs, and this is what the studies indicate, most doctors who have implicit bias, most clinicians, I'll say, who have implicit bias, high amounts on that test, most of them generally, like I said, do not think that they have has any impact on their clinical encounter, but it correlates closely with Black patients' perception with poor communication, less warm, less trust, less trusting relationship. And so that when they have this implicit bias, and so what's happening, this is the misnomer and probably the problem here that I think people don't think about. Even when explicit bias is low and implicit bias is high, the patient feels it. Even when there's zero explicit bias and there's high bias, the patient feels it. Now, here's the thing. We've sort of made it popular to identify and maybe extract or cancel out people who are explicitly biased. But what the studies show is that people with explicit bias are actually more flexible, and you can actually work through those way easier than
Yes.
people who have implicit bias. They're mostly unaware. But when it gets
Unaware.
yeah,
Yeah.
but when it gets activated, right? But when someone actually fits the stereotype, right? So when someone actually fits the stereotype, that implicit bias kicks in whether you want to or not. Why? Because our brains, we know a little bit about information processing, right? Information, impression formation. Our brains are always looking for a quick move from A to B, right? It's always scanning. Is this me versus them? Is this safe versus unsafe? Is this, good versus bad? It's always looking for that and does those quick little cues. I call it, shortcut, if you will. The brain takes shortcut. So we interact with stereotypes even when we don't want to. And those automatic ones, when they get cued, if I run into someone who is an exact example of a very well-known stereotype, I can't help it. It is going to be activated. It is
You
going
know
to be
what, Dr. Tanya?
yeah.
As you are speaking, I'm just thinking, as much as, yes, we're talking about how this is toward Black people, let's talk about when it's us also coming to the system with
Yes.
our own biases.
Oh
And
yeah.
again, you mentioned that we also have our own inherent insecurities. I'll talk about myself. So a few years ago, I had my little girl.
Mhm.
So just before I delivered her, I had food poisoning.
Mm.
I went to a hospital, and of course, I needed IV fluids because I was dehydrated.
Mhm.
The first defense mechanism I had to wear that cape to defend myself. I
Mhm.
am so weak. I'm highly pregnant. I do not want to fight here if I have a bad experience. So
Yes.
I'm coming in with my defense already. I'm saying, listen, you have to protect yourself here.
Yes.
Immediately, when the nurse saw me, very lovely lady, she registered me, and of course, she could see that I'm weak. And I said, I'm gonna need IV fluids. She looked at me, she said, are you a healthcare worker? And it was me protecting myself.
Yes.
And I thought about it. This lady has not done anything to me. I didn't have to present there as a healthcare worker, but
Right.
immediately I had to protect myself.
Yes.
And I didn't want or needed my strength here to fight
Yes.
back if I had a negative experience. So
Yes.
we also come with our own biases that, okay, because I'm Black, she might not be as the nicest, this woman,
You
right? What
you
about other people though who do not have that that
well
privilege,
you
right?
just touched on something that is also a part of one of the courses, and this is this idea behind stereotype threat. Are you familiar
Right?
with stereotype threat? You know that
Yes,
already? So
yes,
this idea is that when I go into the office, and this has happened, if I go in and because the studies indicate that Black women are acutely aware
yes,
that this is a place of discrimination.
yes.
We know it when we get in there. But the studies indicate that that's actually visceral. It actually causes anxiety. It causes changes in our cortisol levels. And literally, we have a visceral response to the idea that we might confirm or experience this discrimination or confirm
Yes,
a stereotype associated with the discrimination.
of course,
And that
yes.
when that happens, it affects how we come into the appointment itself. And so that when we do that, and then they respond, so one of the things that's also important to bring up is, imagine you walk in, you got to defend yourself that way. Then the other part where we talked about clinicians not being aware and having the unconscious bias,
Yes.
one of the studies that I really go into a lot of detail shows that on the surface, these things don't come out, but they come out sort of in a two-way communication. For example, one of the studies I look at says, okay, when you come in, I see you, doctor, and I don't know you're a doctor. Let's say you're unemployed. And let's say, I look at you as an unemployed Black person who doesn't have enough money to pay for your care. What they found was that when I look at when they surveyed the people, and they look at just race, didn't show anything. There was no bias there. But when you tacked on being unemployed and or lazy, then the bias showed through with almost every single question, right? So because when it got tied to a known stereotype, then
Yes.
there was a bias that showed up from the clinician
Yes.
side. right? So you imagine being in a room, you're coming in with stereotype threat, they're coming in with being unaware that those stereotypes are sneaking in, and then you wonder why, one, people don't come back, because that's what the studies show, that when someone's had a bad experience, they just don't come back. That delays treatment. That can
That's
be
basically the previous statement.
yeah, exactly.
Let's talk about right now with
Right.
COVID-19. We know that one of our colleagues passed away here fighting for her treatment,
Yes,
and she succumbed to it.
she
And
wasn't.
the sad thing is, I also looked at your studies there in the States, and you guys, we're going to talk about the healthcare system here in Canada. You guys pay for it. And I saw that even the outcome when your clients, like your Black patients, go to the hospital, already there's that bias that they might not be admitted,
Yes,
the type of medication they're going to receive.
yes,
I actually interviewed here a lady, I think a year ago, who was a lawyer. She fought herself because she was a lawyer. She wanted a mammogram. She wanted a mammogram.
yes,
The system was fighting back and forth, saying no. And guess what she had? She had breast cancer.
yes,
She fought, and she was going to pay for her
yes,
mammogram out of her pocket, but she was refused that opportunity. Now I'm going to talk about now here in the system where I'm at, where our healthcare system is free. I had a client, I had a patient who came back to me because I saw she was seen in the ER. One of the healthiest guys I have comes for flu, cold stuff.
yes.
And this time she went for another kind of serious stuff. And she said, Doc, I literally cried on the bench. I was asking, can I pay for medication?
Yes.
Let's talk about that, the perception of pain. I even saw this on the studies that there's a perception that our skin is thick. We don't feel.
You familiar with here? There is a group of docs I talk about, Dr. Hamilton and Dr. Cartwright. These are guys from the 1800s that did experiments.
Oh, yes.
There's one gentleman.
Yeah, they did all
His whole job was to determine
with
that
no anesthesia, right? Yes.
yeah, and that the skin is thicker. You know, he did things to his. He was paid with being given a slave by a patient of his, and he used that slave to experiment on these very things. You know, regarding pain and having surgery without anesthesia. So these things have long. They have tentacles from not just our ancestors. Listen, my grandmother was born in 1896.
Oh yeah,
People don't.
1800 stuff, sis.
Yeah, my grandmother, no, my grandfather 1896, my grandmother 1900. So when people talk, oh, these are generations ago, these are ancestors that I'm like, no, that's my great grandparents that we're talking about. That some of these things happen with people who are fairly close. And that's pretty rare, but that's just how my family situation is. But the thing that's important to know is that where these things come from, we have got to do a better job. The solution in the past has been just train more Black doctors, right? Just have enough that'll work. But the same system that is causing this problem limits the amount of Black doctors we have.
Opportunities.
Yeah, there's no way.
The opportunities are not there.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm from South Africa, sis. My best friend is an anesthesiologist. I'll tell you that there's few in South Africa. It's hard to get into that space.
Yes, it is.
Okay?
It is.
And how are we going to alleviate this?
We can't be the only ones responsible for this healthcare. Some of the disparity gaps have actually gotten worse since the 50s. And that's an unfortunate truth. With all the technology and all the advances we've had, we've not had enough advances, primarily because we just don't study it with the same vigor that we study everything else. And that has been the biggest problem, is getting our own healthcare community to take it serious enough to study it. How do we fix something we don't study?
We don't know.
How do we fix something we don't even identify?
Let's talk about even the studies. How many Black people are on the studies? And yet we still use that. Like whatever is out there, that's what's used across the board. Right?
It's hard to get. It's hard when the trust isn't there. It's going to be hard to get.
Exactly. That's what I had. Yeah, Black people don't want to go because they don't trust the system. So it becomes a vicious cycle. And honestly, when you think about it, this also poses an expense to the health system because not treating them on time or withholding medications that would necessarily treat and probably cure a condition. This also impacts the health system and the mortality of that country.
Absolutely,
I
because
mean, you guys, USA is one of the unhealthiest society. And
definitely.
when you look at who is unhealthy there, it's the black people who went through loads and loads of generational trauma.
Yes, absolutely. And with the increased morbidity and mortality, absolutely
Yes.
it adds to the overall expenses. Because if I present with the disease at the later stages, then I'm obviously not going to do well. Which brings me to we were talking a little bit about my own personal experiences, and
Right.
this is kind of a good segue to that because I been diagnosed with several autoimmune disorders, and we're trying to figure out what's going on with that. And me being the doctor that I am, due diligence, I'm researching, hey, these particular illnesses, well, it presents this way in most of everybody else. But in Black Americans, what we are seeing is that it presents differently. That some of the telltale signs that you would normally see, you're not going to see in me. I go in armed with that when I'm talking. I'm like, listen, okay, listen, it shows this, that listen, on the stuff on the outside that you normally would see, you don't see, but there's internal organ damage or other problems happening, and that oftentimes gets missed. And then that person presents in a worse state. So, like I said, I'm doing my due diligence. I walk in, I want to talk about that because I'm like, okay, I get it. But I'm concerned that we're going to miss something because of the stats, right?
And the thing is, you're not a familiar specimen.
Oh, but you would think I was in there with a picket sign and a BLM sign, because I'm going to talk about how it might impact me, and it's like, yeah, I'm not talking about race, which is just not comfortable. I'm like, look, I'm not protesting. I'm just saying, like, seriously, it could actually impact me in a way that we miss something. I don't want to miss something. I'm a physician, so I'm looking at this. I'm patient, but even as patient, like you went in and asked for your IV fluids, I'm going in and I'm like, look, here's what it looks like. What do you think? Let's talk about this. And should we be doing something different because I'm African American? Should we be testing for these different variants, or should we be looking for different antibodies? Should we be doing something different? And it's kind of like,
It's exhausting. I'm exhausted on your behalf.
it's like, well,
Yes.
it's like I want to talk about a topic that's difficult, and that's where the training needs to be different, right? Because everyone who's in healthcare has to do competency training, and they have to have the checklist that they're culturally competent, but they're not. They might be culturally competent, but they're not culturally confident. They don't feel confident in having discussions about race. That's a problem. Whether it's good or bad, you need to say, look, I may not always get it right. It's one of the things I talk about is how you approach it when you're talking to your patients. Because all those nice little check boxes that we've been doing in all of our training is not trickling down to the patient.
It's not.
And we've got to be the generation that changes that. I believe that we have to be the generation that changes that. We're already asking them when they leave whether they had a good experience or not. I'm encouraging everyone to include something about whether or not race played a part in your visit.
You know what, Dr. Tanya? Even with history taking, I would love to see a change even in the pre-clinical years.
Yes.
I actually talked about this to colleagues last year, I think, 2020. I had a patient coming back to me crying because a colleague from another race basically just lodged it in a manner that was insensitive. This woman, she had an ectopic and basically was told, you'll never have kids. And imagine, this is a Black woman who is with her husband, who unfortunately could leave her based on the fact that, as culturally, women, they're expected to give birth.
Yeah.
Some families, they even expect that you have to come here and bring boys. Is it dependent on you? So imagine when this bomb is lodged insensitive like that. You'll never have kids. Hello? I have another actor. I have another fallopian tube.
Yeah.
Probably you tell me that I have 50%, right? Or you give me other options. But to lodge it that way, literally, this woman was saying, I'm not sure what is in my husband's mind. I'm not sure if he will stay with me. He will stick around, doc. And will I ever have kids?
Right.
So I think this is very important to our colleagues watching out there. We need to start introducing even the proper history taking.
Absolutely.
How do you communicate? The good side, bad side, we've been taught this thing, but no one really looked at the cultural component. How do you come across your body language? the words you choose.
Yes.
These are the CMEs we need.
Absolutely. And especially
because
when
right now I feel that we're using 1800 stuff.
Yeah.
We have not changed. I
Yeah.
mean, honestly, I was recently impressed. Actually, there's a young man, a medical student in Nigeria, who actually came up with an anatomy book of Black dermatology.
Yes.
Did you see that?
Mm-hmm.
I've never seen it. I've been a doctor for 15 years. In my 19 years of total of my practice, I've never seen a whole Black anatomy book.
Mm. Yeah, it's I know it exists, but it's not used in wide, circulation for sure.
You go to a spa, a medical spa, you are hairy, you want to remove your skin, your hair, and you are told, oh, we don't have laser skin for Black people here or brown people. So these are the things that we need, the system needs to look at, because we are here, we are existing, we are existing with other people, with other humans.
It has to be it has to be a priority on the ground when different technologies are being used, when books are being written. What we understand about human nature is that you do whatever you do from your own perspective, and that's just the truth. So the people who are in power, the people who are making the technology, if they all are the same way, they're not thinking, okay, well, let me think about these other people. They're just thinking about it from their own perspective. And that's what happens when you're not at the table. When you don't have a
you're not on the decision-making table.
And you can't say, hey, by the way, that doesn't fit. It's so pervasive. I'll joke around and I won't use the name of the company, but there's a game that you play that's virtual, and you get to look down and see yourself while you're exercising. And the funniest thing, everybody I shared this with look down and they go, oh wow, but my arms are white. On this game, they didn't even begin to
not accommodate you. It did not on the settings, on their software.
Look down and go,
whoever put in that information there.
I'm certain it didn't come from a bad place. It just came from a place that, listen, we typically do things from our own perspective. Meaning, when I decide to remake a movie, I might make it with people who look like me. When I decide to make a new product, I'm going to make a product with people who look like me. And it's human nature. And that's why a seat at the table is so important. You have to have a seat at the table because no one else is going to really consider you in that way. Not all the time, not about every aspect. Right. And so we've done is sort of a disservice to us by saying, we're colorblind and we're in this situation where color doesn't matter. It absolutely does, right? Because we're all individuals. We all want to be seen. That's
everyone.
The bottom line.
Basic humans, we want to be seen. We want to be heard. We want to be loved. And you know what? I actually, as you said that, it's funny. I was talking to a patient of mine who is Caucasian, and she talked about, you know what, Doc? I know that Black people, not specifically you guys go on about how you experience oppression. I went to a high school where I was the minority, and I experienced racism.
Absolutely.
You understand? So again, we need to be very open about this bias. There's so much we all are. And she said, I do not sit in tables and listen to a Black person saying, I am fully privileged. I've seen it. In high school, I was told every day I was fat, I was ugly by people of another color. So we need to be sensitive. And hence, I always say, each one of us has a responsibility to educate himself or herself.
Yeah.
George Floyd's story really educated us globally.
Well, we as leaders
raise uncomfortable conversations.
Absolutely. But we in leaders in healthcare need to be the writers of the narrative a little bit more, right? Because we tend to go with what's trending and what people kind of come up with and these other terms and all these ideas and really we really have to think about that because this idea when we talk about white privilege and those kind of things, that kind of segues into the research that I do regarding how we interact with shame and guilt because amongst all of these and even to allow some self-reflection, we could elicit collective shame, right? Yes. And not necessarily individual shame, but collective shame.
Yes.
And if you understand how we interact with shame, you automatically know that that's probably not the way to get what you're looking for. The reason why I say that is, and I understand that it probably bucks the system because there's a lot of people like, yeah, you should feel uncomfortable. When I was doing a version of this course last summer, some of the participants had said, no, I think it's okay. This is a Caucasian female. She said, no, I think it's okay. We should feel uncomfortable. And I said, listen, I think what I want you to understand about the shame part of it
Right.
is what happens with shame. So if you do something, let's talk about the difference between shame and guilt. If you do something and you realize you made an error, let's say you broke a cell phone. Okay, fine. I can fix that phone. I can replace that phone. I can remedy the situation. Shame is different because shame says, what's wrong with you that you broke that phone?
Yeah.
And when you do that,
Yes.
the focus shifts onto you. So when you are
Yes.
you
Not
are
the phone.
exactly it's onto you and not fixing the problem. So when you are trying to elicit some type of support, some type of programming, you can't use shame, because if you understand the psychology, you immediately switch the focus onto the person. Now they've got to deal with that shame. And typically the response is not, okay, I'm going to support you.
No.
It's
We
the
need
exact
compassion in
opposite.
this world.
It's
We
the
need
exact opposite.
compassion and love.
Yeah,
Yes.
you can't
Yes.
use that. You can't use that. There in today's world, when we're dealing with so many uncertainties, folks are trying to balance just living, the economy, they're trying to balance their health care with COVID, and they're trying to balance all the other things. And as physicians, especially, you're jumping through hoops for everybody. You got in at least in our country, you got office managers telling you what to do. You got healthcare administrators and rules, and you're jumping through hoops for Medicare and lawyers, and so hoops for those people. And so a lot of times they're just exhausted. And I understand that
Everyone is
it's
exhausted from
hard.
it.
It's like, okay,
And you continuously go to work wanting to come and fight,
yeah,
fighting for the people that look like you. And you don't have to do that. I
yeah,
mean, look at who died more with COVID-19. You look at mostly, let's look at the US there.
yeah.
It's mostly Black people and Latinas. And you look at why, because they get to work jobs, 3 jobs.
I gotta
When
work.
do they go to a doctor for care,
Yeah,
right? Timelessly.
yeah.
So I think the system needs to change. So tell me, what advice can you give here, Dr. Tanya, to anyone? Because I think all of us, we need to grow from this. You
Yeah.
know, diversity and inclusion is something, it's a day-to-day thing we have to, and of course, studies show that teams that work with diversity,
Yeah.
they are more progressive,
Yes.
there's production. So, what advice would you give here? Anyone who's in the clinical setting,
Yes.
what opportunities need to be there for people that don't look like that?
So there's a lot of ways to look at this. And even if you don't participate in courses or do any reading, one of the things we can do for ourselves basically is to be more aware of what's impacting our thoughts. Like something as simple as, what are we allowing ourselves to be exposed to? Whether it be in media, whether it be in social media, because like I said, you might think, that song that's on the radio, you might think you don't know that song, but somehow later on you're tapping your foot because it's in there.
Mm-hmm.
The exposure you have to all these different things, it's real. And the very first thing you can do is be aware of what you're letting in, and be aware of the
Self-awareness.
agenda that others might have to lead you into this sort of desperate feeling. We as people have the ability to fix everything we've talked about today.
Right.
And I don't, and while I understand that the system, because people say, it's systemic racism and it's all the system. Listen, the system is made up of people.
Yes.
And unless the people who are running the system are advocates for what you're trying to do, it will not be successful. We need to not just cancel people, because what people point out is when we run across someone who has an issue, they get fired. Guess what? They go get a job somewhere else. So the problem just keeps going.
That's
So we've got to stop the approach. We've got to change the approach. We've got to actually work through some of this. I think our thought leaders, our clinicians, you don't have to wait till people come out of the Ivy Towers and the research place. We have the medium, we have the means to right now think about us in our own circles, us as clinicians in our own practices. Are we even assessing how our patients are doing? Are they feeling heard? Are they feeling that DICE is impacting? You could do that in your practice right now. And so could every other physician if they
Right.
felt it was important enough and they felt comfortable doing so. And that is where we need to move. We need to move in that direction. I love being a part of that. The course that I do also has a live portion because I think without discussion, we will not improve. So all the other clinical competency courses that are out there, the one that I have that's a CME for docs and social workers, that one is explicitly for us to actually talk at the end. Right, we talk, and what I do with it is I have vignettes, and I have the main character in the vignette is actually a Black female resident, and she has an experience that really sends her over the top. And then through all the rest of the vignettes, we follow situations with her and their friends or family through different situations, because art has it right. When we see something on TV or a movie, and we feel like we're connected to them. We are
Oh,
born.
yes. I'm
So
loving. You know what? It was such a blessing in disguise. This George Floyd thing. Even here in Canada, I'm starting to see buses, you
yes,
know, even the cosmetic stores. There's so much
yes,
diversity.
yes,
Kids are starting to look at people that look like them. I'm still waiting for a response. I wrote to one of the national TVs and I said, I would love to see you guys bringing a First Nations artist
yes,
or a professor coming in front of these TV so that the First Nations kids could look at that and say, that person looks like me.
yeah, absolutely,
Let's
absolutely.
change the narrative.
Yes, we have to
All
change.
we know about them is the dysfunctionality in their communities, and yet there's amazing leaders in
Yes,
that community. I
yes,
want to see the TVs in Canada bringing doctors, engineers,
yes,
all other like people of color to
yes,
come, because at the end of the day, you're not gonna make noise and tell us in jail, in prison, it's all these immigrant children that come from war-torn zones. What are you doing to empower them? Do you
yes,
bring people that look like them who will see that, oh, there's someone that looks like me? Do you know how exciting when a black patient walks into to my practice?
mhm,
That person and myself too, how excited I become to
yes,
see someone who looks like me. For
yes,
her or him to say, thank you.
yes,
I can now remove my mask.
yes,
We want to see more of that.
yes, absolutely.
Because now we're going to complain and sit and complain about the mortalities, all these illnesses, the diseases, and we talk about all these things that impact the health of the country. But what are you doing in power?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. And
You're
but I
doing a
believe
lot.
we all have a role. You know,
Yes,
we all have a role in how we perpetuate change in a positive way, right?
absolutely.
Because what we do is when we bring force is matched, right? We mimic behavior, and so but also the opposite can happen if it's loud enough. You just need to feel. What happens is one person feels like, I can't make a difference, but one person can make some changes and in their own circle, and,
Yeah.
that's kind of what happens because one of the things I encourage when people take courses is to use it in your community, to actually spread it. Right. One of my courses comes with a
It
policy
ripples. It
workplace
does.
policy to address it, not just to address the workplace situations, um, and how to they take those policies and address it so that if you do come in contact with someone who has explicit bias, and instead of them just getting canceled, that we actually work through how do we work through this. Why is this important? This is important because it doesn't do us any good if we're ultimately trying to solve this problem and not
Yes.
just kick this can down the road where our grandkids are still
Yes.
dealing with the same gaps that we're dealing with 100 years ago. If we're still in that situation, we've got to just be better. We've got to have a higher level of emotional intelligence with regard to race. We are racially ignorant. Honestly, we
Right.
really are. As much as what we do, we're uninformed, and there's so many layers to it that we have so much work to do. But it's doable.
It's
I
doable. You
I,
know
I
what? Actually, I have two girlfriends that I'm so proud of,
yeah,
colleagues, and they decided to get into the system and
mhm,
they're doing amazing work. They're
great.
influencing in the tables, in the big tables.
That's
And
it.
that's the whole point. I would like our colleagues that look like us not to sit in little corners thinking that someone is going to drag them to the table. We have to do it. Like you said, we need
Yeah.
to initiate these conversations. We need to be willing to be part of the conversations and
Yes.
not sit in the little corners and complain. Because also that's another issue. We're not
Yes.
going to sit in the little corner and complain that no one is voting. Did you vote for someone who looks like you? Did you raise your hand and say, I want to be part of that discussion? Right?
Yes.
So we
Right.
need to come out of our comfort zones and be part of conversations and start
Yes.
these conversations as difficult as they are, right?
They are, and they're difficult conversations, but we can handle it, right? That's the whole point. We
Absolutely.
can deal with, we can even deal with feelings that are unpleasant. That's, I joke with people all the time. Part of being a psychiatrist is helping people learn how to feel.
Right?
It's okay, even difficult
Right?
feelings. It's okay. We can get through
It's
this.
okay.
And
Yes.
that's why we have to spend so much time sort of regrouping. But it's so important. I think it does require a sort of a shift in the mindset that is doable. It's not someone else's problem. It's not just Black clinicians' problem, right? It's sort of all of our collective
It's a collective, sis.
issues
It's a
that we
collective.
we
We
have
have
to
to.
we have to address. I mean, that's just the bottom line. We have to address it. And I think understanding how we interact with each other just as humans, and
Mhm.
just that very basic part about wanting to be seen and heard and understood.
Mhm.
And that part of it, it's people say, you can't teach bedside manner, or you can't, but you can lead by example, and you can just ask.
We can teach compassion and kindness.
We don't.
People copy it.
But see, the thing is, I think people get concerned about getting it right, because when some of the people who first took the course were like, I just don't want to mess it up. I'm afraid that I'm going to mess it up. I'm going to say something. I'm going to say the wrong thing, and I'm going to make this racial situation worse than we started. And I'm going to say, you don't actually have to be perfect. In fact, you should actually
No.
say that you're not going to. We're going to get it wrong.
And
And
we currently get it wrong
it's okay,
because you're
right?
willing and also you want to learn.
It's okay.
You are
And
bringing your vulnerability right here. You want to do the right thing.
you have to think about what's important about your community.
Yes.
A practice in the middle of Mississippi is going to have a different feel. Like a low income practice in the middle of Mississippi is going to be different than one in New York. You've got to know what the needs are in your local communities. What are the needs of the people in your local communities? What are they impacted by? What medical conditions are impacting them the most? Which people are taking care of those people? How are they, or what are the resources? Do they feel connected? What's going on in that area locally? Take care of local, because I don't think this stuff trickles down from high up down. It trickles up. It trickles from the bottom up. It trickles from everyday people trying to make an impact, and just starting off with the very basics, which is the person that's in front of you. Do they feel seen and
It's
heard?
what we have.
Do they feel seen and heard? You can't necessarily, not every doc is going to be out, teaching courses or doing classes or any of that stuff, but every doc runs across a patient. Every doc has a chance to make a difference in that particular patient's life.
Yes. Yes. I
And
love
that
it.
is where we start. That
I
is
love
where we
it.
start. It's simple. It's simple. We start there. We start with an actual human being. That very person. Yeah, okay, maybe they're part of a statistic, but at the time, at the encounter, they're just a human being who's vulnerable, who's listening to you tell them about what's going on, your expertise to teach them, to help them make decisions about their bodies. Not to just do it for them, but to help them make decisions.
Yes.
The right amount of information.
With
So we can
compassion, Dr. Tanya. With
be exactly.
compassion, Dr. Tanya.
Exactly. Well, we need to work on that sometimes. But like I
Wow.
said, especially here, because you got a ton of patients, and sometimes people make you jump through so many hoops. You're spending. I had a colleague who's an oncologist who said that she was leaving medicine because the job came in and said, you know what, we want your encounters to be 7 minutes now. 7 minutes. She said, I didn't really get into oncology to tell my patients in 7 minutes.
7 minutes. How do you do that? These are
And
people that are vulnerable,
and
who
they
are scared for their lives.
and they
How
still
do you
wanted her
finish
to,
a consult in
exactly
7 minutes?
exactly, and they still wanted her to have good ratings when they left. And she said, I this is not what I
And
signed.
now we are living, and then on top of being the minority there, she's walking away.
She
You
moved
know
away.
what? In my language, in South Africa, we have a concept of Ubuntu. I am because of you. I
Yeah.
think if we could bring that, I thought COVID-19 could bring that from us, the compassion,
Yeah.
the thought of if I go to work, there's something, it's more like my mantra when I go to work. I ask myself, how do I show up to these patients? And
Yes.
for me, actually, it's the 98% of my clients are Caucasian, but
Yeah.
I intentionally, it's my intention. How do
Yes.
I show up?
Yeah.
Lord, guide me because medicine is broad.
Yeah.
Someone can show up in a way that you don't know what's wrong with this person. But how do I show up? I intentionally want to show up my best self,
Yeah.
to do the best. I don't always get it right, Dr. Tanya,
Right.
but my intention is pure. My
Absolutely.
intention.
And your
I'm doing
patients
this.
feel that.
I'm doing this because I would do it for my mother.
I was gonna say your patients can feel that though. So
Absolutely.
that's
In my practice, I have a policy that we accept everyone. There's
Mhm.
clinics that will not accept
Absolutely.
people from the First Nations community,
Absolutely.
right? So I honestly think it starts with our intention and also
Yes.
our hearts.
Absolutely.
Our love need to just transcend
Yeah.
to everyone
Yes.
because we're all the same. This color, this skin, it has brought so much discrimination and so much pain to people, and yet when we are cut, we bleed the same way. My
Yes.
blood is not black,
Yes.
right?
Well,
So I think the key thing is, to colleagues out there, just when you walking into your practice or walking into your workplace, it's very important your intention. How
yes.
do you want to show up to your client, or how do you want to show up to your patient? At
Yes.
the end of the day, how does that day make you feel? And I mean, I'm aware of some clients, there's nothing you can do good that will be enough, and also sometimes that comes from a place of pain.
Well,
I
it
think
does. Of
for
course it
me this year, I've come up with all this. I want peace and compassion to understand people's behaviors.
absolutely. But
Right.
because I've had patients who maybe are not comfortable with me for whatever reason. We know, hey, somebody looked like you, hurt me one time before, and but the bottom line is they want to be heard too.
They want to
You
be
know,
heard.
and they want to be heard too. And it really is. End of the day, that's part of it. And I also have a little bit of a pet peeve and it comes out of the idea of trauma in some sense. We've done a
We
fairly
need to do part two on that one. We need to come back and do.
okay, yeah,
We need to do basically ACEs. I would like you to
me
come back
too.
and talk about
Oh, that's
adverse childhood experiences because that's what brought us here. This
yeah,
whole pain people are dealing with, the insecurities, the pain, and also this all these hierarchies. We need to break them down.
we
I feel we need to come back and do a part two, really.
oh, that's
Dr. Tanya, we didn't talk about the medical. As we wrap up, I'd like you to just show our community how much this pain could actually affect our health.
oh,
The
absolutely.
conditions people are dealing with every day because of the chronic stress that people are facing every
It's
day because of biases.
yeah, it's pretty impactful. I mean, there's been studies that indicate that there's actually changes in the way the body works based on how much stress it's exposed to, and that racial stress has real impact, especially like look at our numbers when it comes to infant mortality and maternal deaths during pregnancy. We understand that's multifactorial, but even when you account for education, poverty, and access, there's still a gap there. There's still a problem. So we know that there's stuff happening. When you talk about from the medical side, when you look at the HPA axis, when you look at what role that plays, we know there's neuroendocrine involvement, even pro-inflammatory cytokines that are in higher number when people have been exposed to this level of stress, right? So because most people think about it as impacting them from an emotional standpoint, like depression or anxiety or something, maybe even like a PTSD related response and race-based trauma work. But it actually it hurts. Racism actually physically hurts,
Yes,
right? And it actually
it's a pandemic on its own. It's a
is.
pandemic on its own.
It,
Yes.
it is, and they were looking at that regarding things like blood pressure and those other things that are not necessarily just sort of lifestyle things, right? And obviously that's
Yeah.
also an issue, but there are some other aspects that need to be looked at, and the impact is real. So they need to heal, right?
We need to heal.
Heal.
We
It's
need to heal. We're gonna come back and do. We're gonna take a
sure,
deep
yeah,
dive on that one because you're gonna need to come and show us how to heal.
Yeah, that's
right?
healing is mandatory. We've got to. And I'm a big fan of healing, and I think we do a decent job. I'll tell you this before we go. I know you got to wrap up. Um, I'm an advocate for addressing the abuser in this case. The reason
Yes,
why I say that is,
yes.
imagine us having children who are being abused, and we go and we give them, therapy and treatment, and we address the abuse, and then we send them back in the abusive
You send
environment.
it back to
And
the source.
that's another thing we haven't done a really good job
Yes,
at, is addressing
yes,
why is this happening? Why
yes.
why are feeling
The
that? So
root
from a
cause.
psychological standpoint, absolutely, we've got to address that, and I also look at those things too. So anyone who
I'm a big fan of that because I'm big with, you look at Norway, there's
Mhm.
not many prisons there because they deal with their rehabilitation quite
Yeah,
well.
right.
They're sending people to jail and them coming back, repeating the same vicious cycle. It's
Well,
not working. We need to change the systems.
the
All right.
jail,
We
yeah, the
cannot sit here and complain about the obesity in Black people. And yes, they are dying because of COVID-19. But
yeah,
what are you doing about their obesity as a country? We need to look at the design thinking.
all
What are
related.
these people needing? We
Yeah,
cannot continuously read all these statistics when they are sent out to World Health Organizations. What are we doing about them?
right. The
It's a
social
big show.
the social determinants of health are starting to be studied and looked at. I mean,
Yes.
if you were to remove the problems associated with drugs or alcohol, we would decrease the number of people in our prison system.
Of
And
course.
think about the number of people who are there who are dealing with this. And I have a young man in mind. Next time we meet, we can talk about, is a perfect example of us not doing a great job of addressing
Right.
health. And so, like I said, we all have a role to play, and I want people to feel empowered that they can do so. And that's
Yes. We
absolutely
need to
part of
heal
it.
the abuser. We need to heal the source of trauma because otherwise we keep complaining.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's time for
We
action.
keep
We can do
complaining.
it. I joke around. I say, I'm part of Generation X. We that group that got out there and do what we had to do, fix it. We'll go ahead and figure it out. We do, we do whatever makes us independent. Sorry about that. Some noise. But yeah, we go ahead and take care of those things. Sorry about that.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
You
we
know
we
what, Dr. Tanya, I don't want us to stop because this is a topic I'm passionate about. And thank you so much to our viewers that's still here. Thank you for staying. And I see your beautiful comments. I'm gonna look at them here. As we wrap up, I just want to leave you with this. Let's be just compassionate. As doesn't matter. Yes, we talked about the clinical, the healthcare, but just as humans, as we are interacting with each other, let's
yeah
just be compassionate. As we can see, we've had a global collective pain. All
yeah
of us experienced it the same way. This
yeah
was actually probably a blessing in disguise for us to feel pain so that we can be kicked off a little bit from our comfort zone so that we can be
yeah
a little bit more compassionate towards each other. So I think honestly, this is an opportunity for each one of us to look at, you know, our souls, if we
yeah.
are right with each
Absolutely,
other, you know,
absolutely. Like I said,
because this happens when you are not right with yourself, with your spouse. You come to work and you are nasty, and your biases they kick in, and of course, who unfortunately becomes your victim is the
absolutely,
people of minority groups,
absolutely.
right? So
Yeah,
I think it's important for all of us to just exercise that compassion and love and the kindness,
sounds good.
And Dr. Tanya, please share with us here, how can people get a hold of you? And of
Oh
course,
yes,
I love that you also work with organizations because really diversity and inclusion is a big topic right now. We need it.
important.
I think just for the humanity to thrive.
Yeah, absolutely, it is. So one of the ways to get in touch with me, if you can send me either an email, or you can send me, you can go to my website, Dr. Tanya Tonja.net. So you can go there. That has information on the courses. It has my email address, which is comedy@drtanya.net. Comedy means shared interest. All right.
Right. I just
Shared
want to get your email right here, Doc. Is it Dr. Tanya Johnson.net?
Dr. Tanya, no Johnson, just drtanya.net. That's the best
Okay.
way to get in touch with me. And then as far as just a straight email, comedy,
Okay.
COMITY.
Let me write it down here. Email
Yeah,
is
I should have put that up for you in that little.
Yes, actually, I should have done that.
Yeah, that would help
So
too.
it's Dr. Tanya, like TONJA.net, right?
Yes, that's right. That's right.
That's your
And that,
website. In fact, people when they get on your website, they'll find you there.
absolutely, they can check an email. They can ask questions if they want me to come and talk with them, or if they want to discuss this any further. I do.
Trainings, I
I've
would
done
love you to,
trainings.
yes,
Absolutely,
in
I
the
speak
healthcare
with
institutions.
residency programs, medical schools. I speak with residents because we want this to be practical. We
Yes,
want to have people want direction. It sounds
yes.
good to talk about it, but they want to know what do I do. Right, we're doers in clinic. We're like, how do I fix that? What do I do? So we want to give them ways to do that, and that's part of what that's for. So I appreciate the opportunity to even discuss this, and I look forward to us possibly doing
We're
this
coming
again.
back for part two, sis.
Okay, good.
We're
Okay,
coming back for part two. Really, thank you so much, Dr. Tanya.
absolutely.
Thank you so much for the work you do because truly, like you said, we need more people of diverse communities.
Yeah,
How do we lead in this world? When
yeah,
we are more diverse, it's more productive and it's more successful. So again, to our
absolutely.
viewers, thank you so much for staying with us. Next we come back. This
Yes,
year we have these amazing speakers. It's getting better and better, and it's only getting better and better because of you. You are choosing to be here, and I understand there's so many things you could be doing, but you are choosing to be part of these discussions. And thank you so much for being with us. Come next week, same time, same place, and God bless. Thank you so much, Dr. Tanya. I
thank
love you, sis.
you. Thank
God
you.
bless.
This has been an